Okay, so this is an introduction. This speech is all about designer babies, reproduction, IVF. I kind of give you just a timeline of how it's developed since IVF started. IVF, is in vitro fertilization, but I will go over some of the key words. So, in vitro fertilization, or IVF. I'll mention a couple of books, A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult. I mention cytoplasm. You don't need to know what it is, I explain it, just try and figure out the equivalent. Mitochondria is another germ thing. This is all in the speech. I speak about a tool which is called CRISPR-Cas9, which you can just keep in English, CRISPR-Cas9. I mention the Universal Declaration on the Human Genome and Human Rights, and the germline interventions, which I think, if I remember rightly, I do explain. And it's all in the speech. It's all in the speech. And lastly, I speak about a 3-person baby, which is when DNA is taken from 3 different people. And again, I will explain everything. Okay? Sorry. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, science is a wonderful thing. Incredible discoveries have consistently improved and changed our lives. Even some of the most controversial discoveries have found a place in our world. However, what happens when science goes too far? How do we decide what is considered as too far? And how do we control it? Well, today I'd like to speak to you about babies. Now, science has made it possible for women who find it difficult to fall pregnant to have a child, which is incredible. So where's the problem, you might ask? Well, many scientific discoveries in this field of reproduction have been made in the last few decades, which have raised many ethical and moral questions. So I'd like to just go through each of these discoveries and try to illustrate why science may just have gone a step too far. Let's go back to the beginning, to 1978 and Louise Brown. Now, Louise was the first child to be born via in vitro fertilization, or IVF, as we call it. Now, this is a process where eggs are taken from a woman's ovaries and fertilized by sperm in a laboratory. The fertilized egg, or eggs, is then implanted in the woman's body in the hope of establishing a successful pregnancy. Now, at the time, the world's media flocked to see such an incredible scientific development. The idea that an egg could be fertilized outside of the human body and then placed back in, potentially leading to a successful pregnancy, was simply amazing. However, there were many people who opposed this process, mainly religious groups. They were fiercely against the idea of playing God with reproduction. And of course, in this process, many embryos die, which is also a big issue for them. Even secular society were shocked. Many newspapers regularly compared IVF to a book by Aldous Huxley, which is called A Brave New World. And this was published in 1932. In this book, natural sexual reproduction is banned and humans are grown in labs through a similar process to IVF. Given that IVF is much more common now and an estimated 6 million children have been born via IVF, you might think the comparison is a little bit dramatic. However, with each new scientific advance, the media regularly compares it back to this book. So what about the next advance in science? Well, in 1996, an American woman named Maureen Ott fell pregnant after 7 years of trying to get pregnant with IVF. IVF didn't work for her, sadly. So she decided to sign up to an experimental procedure where doctors extracted her eggs, injected her husband's sperm, but they also injected a small amount of cytoplasm from another woman's egg before implanting it back into her womb, effectively creating a three-parent baby, or a three-person baby, if you like. Now, Maureen gave birth to a very healthy baby girl, but the procedure raised a mass of questions, especially in relation to mitochondria, which are kind of organelles which power our cells. They're like a battery. Now, this mitochondria can be found in cytoplasm, and the problem with it is that it contains DNA, which means that a three-parent baby can possess genetic material of 3 people. Now, this genetic material can be passed on via the mother to all of her offspring. In science, this is known as crossing the germline. And at the time, scientists said that this was incredibly risky, so this is why it was such a big problem. This process was eventually put on hold in the USA because they asked for more research to be carried out. But I'll explain later on that it is now being used again today in the UK. Now let's move forward to the year 2000 and Adam Nash. Now, you might be familiar with this story if you've read or seen the film My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult, because Adam was the author's inspiration. Now, Adam Nash is what we could call a saviour sibling. So he was conceived through a selective process of IVF. Now, at the time, Adam's parents had another child who was incredibly sick. She was so sick, she was dying. So his parents decided to allow doctors to screen embryos before being implanted in order to select the one that has the exact right cells for the child to act as a donor for his sister. Now, of course, we can't imagine what a horrific situation these parents were going through. But of course, this procedure raises so many ethical and moral dilemmas. Is it really right to bring another human being into the world with the sole purpose of saving another human? Moving on now to 2012 and the development of a tool called CRISPR-Cas9. Now, this tool allows for the precise and easy manipulation of DNA. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but I will explain it. So, the CRISPR part of this tool is like a GPS device. It's a guided molecule. So scientists will input into a computer where they want the GPS to go. And then with the Cas9 part, which is essentially scissors, molecular scissors, they cut the place where they've been directed to go. So once they cut this genetic code, which is what they're trying to cut, the other parts of the DNA that are left either repair themselves, so they move back together, or scientists replace it with a whole new genetic code. This is incredible yet horrifying. It was first tested on mice, but human trials have now begun in China, I believe. But according to the Universal Declaration on the Human Genome and on Human Rights, these kind of techniques could be contrary to human dignity. The problem is that science moves so quickly, it's very, very difficult for us to keep up. Now on to the most recent development in the field. In a world first, in 2015, the United Kingdom voted to approve mitochondrial donation. Now, this is linked to what I spoke about earlier with Maureen Ott and the three-person baby. So some women carry specific mitochondrial DNA that have mutations, and the problem with these mutations is that they cause a lot of serious health issues, such as seizures, blindness, mental impairment, or early death. This new technique that was introduced in the UK means that parents' DNA is combined with healthy mitochondria of another woman, which therefore eliminates the chance of a child inheriting the disease from the mother or father. The change is also permanent, so it eliminates the chance of this happening to any of the descendants of the offspring. Some may say this is a miracle solution, but once again, it has been subject to a massive ethical debate. While its primary aim is to eliminate disease, it opens the door to many, many other options, such as so-called designer babies. And this is where parents can choose eye colour, hair colour, everything else. And this could start us on an incredibly slippery slope. To sum up, in the space of 40 years, science has moved from helping women in difficulty fall pregnant through IVF to actually being able to alter an embryo's DNA. While many praise this as an incredible scientific advance, which it is, there are two things that we cannot forget. Firstly, there may be unintended consequences of these procedures, which of course we will only discover by trying them out. And do we really want to use humans as guinea pigs for this? Secondly, and more importantly, should we be doing this? Isn't this just playing God by picking and choosing the child that we want? Of course, the debate is a lot more complex, and we have to have a lot of discussion and debate in order to find some sort of solution or some sort of middle ground. But I fear that we're moving down a road that we might not be able to come back from. And don't forget, just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should. Thank you very much.